What is up, guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV, and in today's video we are doing something other than a market watch. I actually wanted to have a discussion with you guys regarding Dark Ruler No More. So as you guys all know, this is one of the world premier spell cards that will be coming out in the 2019 Megatins as a promo, and it's honestly one of the most game-breaking cards that I have ever seen. Over the last year or so, a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! Has revolved around just setting up like the strongest, most unbreakable board when you're going first, and then essentially just preventing your opponent from playing the game entirely. Dark Ruler No More really tries to put a stop to that, as it's a single card that stops your opponent from using all of those effects that they spent their entire turn to set up, giving you the opportunity to fight back and make a counterplay. Honestly, playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Isn't as fun when you don't even get the chance to make like a single play without it being negated, and this card really works to try to help level the playing field between players that are going first and second. However, this doesn't mean that the card is an auto win, as there are actually a number of factors that kind of work together to balance this card out. While it is a very strong card, it is by no means perfect. Over the last little while, I have seen a few players kind of like blow the card out of proportion with how good it is, saying that it's going to end combo decks completely. And while I do think that it is a strong card, it is important to consider ways to play around the card and the card's limitations, right? Because it's important to know how to adapt your deck or certain plays or strategies to work around this card for when it's inevitably dropped against you. So that being said, let's get right into the discussion. Okay, so the effect of Dark Ruler No More states: negate the effects of all face-up monsters your opponent currently controls until the end of this turn. Also, for the rest of the turn after this card resolves, your opponent takes no damage. Neither player can activate monster effects in response to this card's activation. So obviously, it's very important here that your opponent cannot respond to this card with a monster effect, since otherwise they would be able to negate it with something like Naturia Beast or number 90. And because of this, all of those monsters that your opponent may have put onto the field lose their effects. Your opponent can't use their monster effects to negate your cards or destroy them. Because of this card, you as the player going second are going to be able to make plays without as much fear of your opponent just negating everything you do, giving you a fighting chance for when you are forced to go second. Now, it is important to note that this card does negate all effects, not just ones that activate, so it also will stop cards like Vanity's Fiend or Majesty's Fiend, so it is really useful in that way. Okay, so I think that understanding the effect and the impact of Dark Ruler No More is pretty obvious. However, the part that I think a lot of players haven't considered, or maybe isn't so obvious, is the number of ways that you can work around Dark Ruler No More as the player that's going first, whose board is going to be hit by this card. Now, first of all, Dark Ruler No More can only not be responded to by monsters. You can still use spells or traps in response to this card. This means that cards that are counter traps, so we have like Ultimate Fire Formation Sinto, the new Fire Fist counter trap card. We have cards like Infernity Barrier or Orcus Crescendo, or we have generic cards like Solemn Judgment or Dark Bribe. Those cards can still negate Dark Ruler No More, meaning that if you were to draw into those cards or search them, your board would still be safe. Secondly, if we have a continuous effect on the board that negates spells before Dark Ruler No More is activated, your opponent wouldn't be able to activate it at all. Therefore, if you can end the board with something like Spell Canceller on the field, they would first have to find a way to eliminate the Spell Canceller before using Dark Ruler No More to break your board. And finally, you can negate the effect of Dark Ruler No More with a monster effect that negates a card on the field, provided that you have a spell or trap card that can be activated in response to Dark Ruler No More. So let's take a close look at the effect of Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss, whose effect states that you can target one face-up card your opponent controls and negate its effects until the end of the turn. So Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss doesn't negate the activation of the card, just its effect. So assuming that Dark Ruler No More is still on the field, it can be negated. What this realistically is going to look like is Chainlink 1, Dark Ruler No More is activated, and then you responding as Chainlink 2, you can activate a spell or trap card. It could be something like a Mystical Space Typhoon or a Quick Launch, just kind of like anything, because as long as it's a spell or trap card, it can be used in response to Dark Ruler No More. And then Chainlink 3 Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss's effect to negate the effect of Dark Ruler No More, because Dark Ruler No More is still on the field until the entire chain has resolved. Because it's still on the field, its effect can then be negated. Now, there aren't too many cards that function like this. Like, the ones that jump to mind immediately are Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss and Crusadia Equimax, but situationally, these cards can save the day in a really tight spot, and I think that you should be careful of what cards have effects like this when you're constructing your decks. Okay, so another limitation of Dark Ruler No More is that it only stops the effects of monsters that are on the field while the card is resolving. So hand traps have obviously been extremely popular over the last couple of years, and you can still use hand traps even if the effects of your monsters on board have been negated. Everyone seems to be playing hand traps in like almost everything, and I don't think that that is a trend that's going to be going away anytime soon. So these hand traps are still a way to interact with your opponent and stop them from completely destroying your entire board that you've worked so hard to set up. And also, of course, we can still use the effects of monsters that are summoned to the field after Dark Ruler No More has resolved. So for example, in Orcus, we can still use the effect of Symbol Skeleton, since its effect is one that activates in the graveyard. And if we summon back Dingirsu, we can still use the effect of Dingirsu on the field to send your opponent's card to the graveyard or attach to Banished Machine Monster as an Xyz material, since Dingirsu wasn't on the field until after Dark Ruler No More has resolved. Obviously, in this specific example, we're assuming that Orchestrated Babel is still on the board because it would have to be a quick effect used during your opponent's turn, but we can apply similar logic if we had a card like Call of the Haunted or Oasis of Dragon Soul to use during the opponent's turn instead. Now, what we also have to keep in mind is that Dark Ruler No More is just another normal spell card. There are very few cards in the game that are able to search this card, and even the ones that do have very situational applications. So like we have Left Arm Offering, but that card has a really high cost and probably isn't worth playing if you just want to break your opponent's board, because you would have no resources left in your hand other than this card. We can look at Cyber's Clock Dragon, but no one's really playing that card. And then we do have that new Mathmech XYZ monster that's coming out, but that does require 4 level 4 monsters in order to make it to search a spell or trap card, which isn't that great because your opponent's probably going to use their negates to stop you from putting that monster on the board in the first place. So what that leaves us with is having to hard draw the card, and it's probably going to be a 3 of if you are playing it, which is fine. So assuming that you're playing a 40 card deck and that you're going second, so you're going to start the game with 6 cards in hand, there is roughly a 40% chance that you're going to start the game with a copy of Dark Ruler No More in your opening hand. Now, don't get me wrong, this card does pose a very real threat when it is drawn. And honestly, the mere fact that this card exists at all, and the fact that the card will be seeing so much play, is definitely going to be a game changer. A 40% chance of opening with this card though, when you're going second, means that you're only going to be seeing this card less than half of the time. Right? Like, it's still important to have a way to deal with this card or to play around it or to adapt your strategy in somehow. But just like how you aren't always going to draw that card that you're playing to get around Dark Ruler No More, your opponent just as often isn't going to be drawing Dark Ruler No More themselves, so it's going to kind of balance out somewhat. And the final point that we're going to keep in mind here is the fact that if you use Dark Ruler No More, your opponent can't take any more damage for the rest of the turn. So it gives you the ability to destroy all of their monsters and break the board that they've set up, but you cannot go for game that turn, and as a result, your opponent will have the next turn to make a follow-up play. Now, this does have several implications here. First of all, you as the player who activated Dark Ruler No More has to be able to establish a board that will survive your opponent's next turn, since you aren't going to be able to end the game. However, you have one less card to do so because one of those cards was Dark Ruler No More, and you also have to be wary of your opponent dropping the card on you, meaning that it may not necessarily be smart for you to commit all of your resources to the board as well. And on the other hand, as a player who wants to try to set up a field going first on the first turn, you have to keep in mind that your opponent may have Dark Ruler No More, and if you don't have a way to negate it, it would be wise to keep some resources in your hand to have a follow-up play for the turn after. Otherwise, you would be stuck top decking. However, by keeping some of those resources in your hand, you're setting up a weaker field that might potentially be more easily broken, even if they don't have Dark Ruler no more. So really, the fact that this card exists and the possibility of your opponent potentially having access to the card really forces players to make more calculated decisions about the resources that they're willing to commit to the field on any given turn. So overall, Dark Ruler No More is definitely one of the craziest cards in the game that I've seen in a long while. Like, honestly, I read the effect of this card and I was like, I didn't really believe it. Like, I didn't think that there was any way that this card was real. Like, the fact that your opponent can't use monster effects in response to it, that's kind of scary. It's like super poly-esque, but it's really necessary though, because every single deck in the game just seems to focus on throwing all of these negates out onto the board, where even with your opponent's like ideal hand, it's still difficult to break these boards. I do like the card though. I am hoping that it promotes a sense of playing like back and forth and like those mind games between the two players. That's something that I really enjoy. You have to be more mindful now of how you're going to proceed through your next couple of turns, rather than just hoping that your opponent isn't going to break through that board on the first turn. It also helps promote the idea of managing resources, right? You now have to be more mindful of what resources you're committing to the board versus what you're saving for a following turn. Personally, I'm hoping that like this card along with Nibiru are going to result in a bit more success for control decks being played in the format, because personally I really like playing control decks a lot more than I like playing combo decks, but that's just my personal preference. Anyways, that is it for this video, guys. I hope you all enjoyed the discussion. Hopefully you're thinking about how best to adapt your deck or strategy for when Dark Ruler No More and the other cards from the Megatins come out. Both of these cards are absolutely game-changing, so I'm excited to see how Dark Ruler No More and Nibiru impact the meta. If you guys did enjoy this video, please be sure to leave me a thumbs up and let me know in the comments section below what you guys think of Dark Ruler No More. How will you guys be adapting your deck or strategy to play around this card or to incorporate this card? What cards will you be playing now that maybe you weren't playing before? Or how do you think the game is going to change as a result of this card being released to the TCG? Also, please be sure to subscribe to MST.TV if you haven't already, because we have a lot more conversations and discussions coming up on the way. So yeah, be sure to stay tuned. Thanks for tuning into this episode. And as always, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.